Hey, welcome everybody. Yes, this is a story about a fence. Now, it's a story that many of us have heard before multiple times. However, it keeps, for some reason, keeps coming up, and I don't understand why. You would think after all this time, people would understand what is meant by fence sitting. However, they don't. I'm constantly in these Facebook groups, and people have no idea what they mean by fence sitting. And so I have a little presentation, hopefully it'll be short, that people can use to send people to when they start talking about fence sitting. Now, I was going to have this originally for atheists, right? Because, like Steve's Sunday school, usually more for atheists. But then I thought to myself, well, it's not this atheist to make this mistake. But even still, even though mostly atheists kind of do this, I think it's beneficial that atheists know this stuff too, right? So when an atheist kind of talks about fence sitting, they can kind of guide the atheist and say, okay, look, this is where you're making a few mistakes, right? So anyways, this will be interactive. I am watching the chat, so please, if you find any issues with what I'm saying, if you don't understand, by all means, stop and say something. I'm completely fine with that. This, like I said, is a very short presentation. It's nothing extravagant. My graphics suck. Thank you for my friends who have pointed that out to me. I appreciate that. I love when people tell me my graphics suck, because I'm not a graphics person. This is why I have a Cheshire. But unfortunately, I did this all myself, so I can't blame these crappy graphics on her. When I can, I'll let you know, right? So, anyways, let's get this kind of started here. So, what a fence is. A fence is basically something that has a position between two, I'm going to say, contradictory positions. And I don't want to say like dichotomous or as far as a strict dichotomy, because a fence isn't something that exists in a strict dichotomy, right? Strict dichotomy would be the case where you have a proposition. That proposition is either true or it's not true, right? It's either the case that the sky is blue, or it's not the case that the sky is blue. And you just put that little sentence in prior to it and make everything into the negation to make it a strict dichotomy, right? It is not the case. Now, we normally don't speak that way. We don't speak like, oh, it is not the case. We just say it's not true, or the sky is not blue, right? It means the exact same thing. So when somebody says the sky is not blue, they're saying it's not the case, the sky is blue. There's no middle ground between a strict dichotomy, right? Between the sky is blue, it is not the case that the sky is blue. There's no fence to be had there. So when people say, there's no fence, they're talking about that particular dichotomy, which is true. There is no fence to be had there. However, there is a fence to be had between contradictory positions, which are when you have the case where you can believe something to be the case, or you can believe it to be not to be the case, right? And that's where this fence exists. So in this particular case, we have, dealing with the proposition of God existing, we have people that are out there that believe God exists, okay? We call them theists. It doesn't matter what kind of theist they are. They could be a Catholic, they could be a Muslim, they could be a Jew, they could be a Hindu, they could be polytheist. It doesn't matter. Generally speaking, when we're talking about theism, we're just saying that they believe at least one God exists. Okay? For simplicity, we'll go with at least one God. So that includes polytheist, it includes deist. This is a non-classical schema, it's called. Then on the other side of the fence, right, we have people that believe there are no gods, right? That God does not exist. So those are two contradictory positions. In other words, that if it is the case that God exists, one of them is right and one of them is wrong. If it is not the case that God exists, one of them is right, one of them is wrong. Both beliefs can both not be true and both cannot be false. One of them has to be the case, right? However, there's only really three rational positions you can have when it comes to beliefs. You can believe a proposition is true. You can believe the proposition is false. We call that disbelieving the proposition. You can believe neither that the proposition is true or false, or theoretically you could believe both. There are cases like, cognitive dissonance, or if you get into stochastic logic, there's different things in stochastic logic that allow for things like that. But for the most part, those are not rational positions, right? It's not rational to say, I believe God exists and I believe that God does not exist. So we kind of exclude that from the conditions of rational positions. So the three main positions we have then are believes God exists, believes God does not exist, and then you have somebody who believes neither. That's what we call the agnostic position, right? That's the position that you do not have a belief either way. That is ubiquitous throughout the literature. Again, I'm not trying to convince the people that don't understand agnosticism. That's not what this video is for. If they want to say, look, my dictionary has it as the knowability of gods or the impossibility of gods. Okay, great. That's in the epistemological domain. If we're going to talk about, the knowability of gods and we're having a discussion on skepticism, perfectly fine definition to use. That's not the domain we're in. We're talking about ontological domain, which is the existence of God. And when it comes to the existence of God, an agnostic is somebody who has no position on that particular proposition, right? Now, moving on from that, you could express that logically. Excuse me. And I know a lot of you have already been through all this, but we have a lot of new people coming to the channel, and I think this is good review for a lot of people, and it's also good for the people who have never seen this stuff before, because, again, I'm seeing it happen all the time on Facebook groups where they don't understand what this middle position is, this agnostic position. So, logically, we can express this. And if you look on one side of the fence, we have what is notated by BP, and then there's an arrow, not B, not P. And what that means is it's a symbolic language. To say, believes the proposition implies that you don't believe the proposition is false. This is what a theist would do, right? A theist would say, I believe the proposition that God exists is true. That implies that he does not believe that the proposition is false, right? So there's implicature there. That's how you read that logical notation. On the other side of the fence, the atheist who believes there are no gods is implying that they do not believe that there is a God. There's an implication there. So an atheist who says, I believe there are no gods, implies they do not believe that it is the case that there is a God. So there's two factors to be had there. There's two propositions. There's the proposition God exists, and this proposition God does not exist. This is framed in the proposition God does exist. Now, you could do it in the negation just as much, right? The logic is exactly the same. It's just ease of readability, and generally, we go by the proposition God exists. However, I could totally rework this and go from the proposition God does not exist. It's still P. It's just the P represents the position that God does not exist. Okay, so don't think that P always has to be positive, right? Okay. In this case, it is positive, but one's in the positive of the negation, one's in the positive of the affirmation, right? So in both cases, you're making a positive claim. You're saying, hey, God exists, God doesn't exist. Those are both positive, right? All right, now. If you look on the fence there, there's a third position, right? Where I know a lot of atheists don't think there's a third position. They're just completely wrong. What happened was basically a while back, a guy named Dan Barker started confusing people about agnosticism, and he started putting out misinformation, confusing the ontological domain or the epistemological domain with the ontological domain. And so he was telling people there's no middle ground, blah blah blah, and he was absolutely wrong because logically there completely is. And it was represented this way, not BP and not B, not P. What that means is basically, if you could read it just from what I told you, it says, I do not believe the proposition is true. And that little caret symbol, that means and. Think of it as an A without the middle bar. So, and, it's same thing logically. Does not believe the proposition is true and does not believe the proposition is false. That's what the agnostics is saying. The agnostics is saying neither position. Now, excuse me. So why I think this is important is that if you look on one side of the fence, you're going to have the people that are atheist. On the other side of the fence, you're going to have people that are theist, or atheism and theism, right? So this is where the lack of belief atheism comes in. The lack of belief atheist says, look, I do not have a position on the proposition God exists. I hold to what's called not BP. Now, if you look down at the very bottom right there, you'll see where that exists, right? Not BP. Does not believe God exists. That's perfectly fine. They can have that position. Matter of fact, the agnostic has that position. The problem that they run into is this is where the logic kind of comes into play, and they seem to have a difficult time understanding. If they only hold to not believing the proposition, there's only two possible positions they can have logically. They can be on one side of the fence, on the bottom, and hold the position there are no gods. Or they can hold the on the fence position, where they do not have a belief either way. And if you look logically, when you see that not BP, there's only two places where that not BP exists. It's on the right-hand side of the fence, and it's on the fence. There is no not BP on the left-hand side of the fence. It doesn't exist on the left-hand side of the fence. Right? Because that would be a contradiction. You cannot believe P and not believe P. That would be an epistemic contradiction, right? We again, putting aside the cognitive dissonance or anything like that, or whatever weird things you want to say when believe and don't believe at the same time. But we'll just, for arguendo, say, look, you can't believe and something's true and not believe it's not true. You can't believe something's true and not believe it's true at the same time, right? That seems kind of odd, right? So the theist who says they believe God exists, they cannot say they don't believe God exists. So the not BP only exists in two places, on the right-hand side or the left-hand, or excuse me, the right-hand side or the middle. Now, the lack of belief atheist says, oh, look, I'm only keeping on the right-hand side. I'm calling that atheist. Okay? Now, again, the problem runs into, if they do that, then where is the agnostic position? The agnostic position seems to be subsumed by the atheist position. This is part of what I call the atheist semantic collapse argument that I have. I also have in the link, the video description, two other things that people should read if they haven't read them yet. The Gumballs and God essay I've written that has been reviewed by Landon Kurt Knoll, and the on the fence how to trigger an atheist on the fence, or fence sitting. You want to go check that one out too. But you might want to read those if you've got a chance and you have not yet read them. Jamie Russell, welcome to the Curious Hole. Thank you, Jamie Russell. I appreciate you becoming well, actually, you've been a member, but increasing. I appreciate it a lot, actually. Patreon has been rough lately, but it's understandably so with everything going on in the world. But if you happen to like these types of things, I'm going to be doing more reviews and more presentations. If you happen to like them and you get something out of them, please feel free to become a member of the channel and or become a Patreon. Either one's just as fine. All right, so as you can see here, though, the lack of belief atheists, if they only say that they don't believe P without believing God does not exist, they're fence sitting. They're in the middle, right? Because if you look at the logic at the very bottom, it says B, not P, right? If they don't hold to that, what is that? It's not B, not P, which is the middle. So if they do not believe God exists and do not believe God does not exist, where is that? That's fence sitting. Lack of belief atheists are fence sitting. All right, moving on here a little bit. And I'm going to clear that up a little bit so you guys can see a little easier here. So on the left-hand side, you have the people that believe, which is BP. On the bottom side, you have the people that believe God does not exist. And then you have the middle ground, the fence sitters. Now, this is where the atheist usually has an objection, saying, well, I'm not making any claims. I'm only lacking a belief. That's fine. But this proves logically that if they lack a belief and they don't hold the position that there are no gods, they're fence sitting. Whether they like it or not, they can call it whatever they like. It doesn't matter. The term is fence sitting. That's what we call it. I'm a fence sitter. I'm agnostic. I don't know why they want to argue against logic so much, because we've shown this so many times to them using logic, but they continue to balk at being called fence sitters, or even accepting that they're fence sitters. I mean, I can understand they don't want to be called it, whatever. But when you say yes, but you're fence sitting, you're in the middle. They're like, no, I've taken a position. No, you haven't taken a position. If you merely do not believe, you haven't taken a position. You only take a position when you say, I believe something. So if they don't hold the position, I believe that God does not exist, or if they don't hold the position that God does exist, they have not taken a position. That is what fence sitting is. And again, it's not between God not existing and not believing God existing. There's no fence there. That's not. Then when they say, well, I have made a decision, I don't believe, that's not making a decision, right? Because you're either on the right-hand side or you're in the middle. It's ambiguous. You haven't decided anything. You just said, okay, I don't believe on the left-hand side, right? The BP, I'm not on the theist side. But, okay, but which side, where are you at then? Are you in the middle or on the atheist side, right? It doesn't tell you anything, right? All right. All right, so now I'm going to try to explain it using the Gumballs analogy, right? This is why I said, if you haven't read the Gumballs and God essay that I wrote, it's actually one of my favorite things I've ever written. I think it's pretty decent. Feedback on it has been really good. I know Landon really liked it. I know that Dr. Rana read it, and he really liked it. So I'm going to try to explain this using Gumballs, because a lot of people like the Gumballs analogy. So let's do the exact same thing using Gumballs. So if you have a metaphorical, ontological gumball machine, and you can't look inside of it, and this is really something that it really boggles my mind when atheist says, well, all I have to do is count them. No, you're missing the point. This is a gumball machine that you cannot count them. You cannot look inside. No matter how much you want to, tough titty. You can't do it, okay? So when they say, wow, I can look at it. No, you're missing the point of the exercise. Let's assume that this is a gumball machine where you cannot count them, and they're quantized. In other words, there are a quantized number of gumballs in there. There's no halves, there's no quarters. There are either a whole number. There's a whole number of them. So there's a couple different conditions it could be, right? There's two conditions. There's even or odd. There's a dichotomy between even and not even, right? Either something is even or it is not the case it is even. Okay, that is a strict dichotomy. It is either the case as odd or it's not odd. That is a strict dichotomy. So ontologically speaking, and what I mean by that is just in being, right, in essence of whatever the conditions are of reality here, the number of gumballs in that are going to be even or odd. There are no other options for that. Okay? By the way, if you guys got any issues so far, like I said, I'm watching the live chat, so let me know. But if you guys are good to go so far, great. So if they're only even and odd, then we can say that if it's not even, then odd, right? If it's not odd, then even, right? These are basic, I'd say relationships, right? It's kind of like if it's not false, it's true. If it's not true, it's false, right? Because there's no other conditions for a proposition. It must be either true or false. So in this particular case, if it's not even, the only other option is it's odd. So odd means not even. Not even, then odd. Right? So these are relationships, but the dichotomy is between here, even and odd, because odd is not even. It must be one of the two cases. It must be even or it must be odd. So this is where the problem I think that a lot of atheists have. They don't understand the difference between it being even or odd and the belief. Right? The belief that it's even or you do not believe it's even. That is a dichotomy. Yes, absolutely that's a dichotomy. You either believe it's even or you don't, right? But there's also believe odd or do not believe odd. That also is a dichotomy, right? So you have two positions which are contradictory positions. You can believe that they're even or you can believe that they're odd, just like we had at the fence, right? You have the top position and the bottom position, right? You can believe that it's true, you can believe that's false. Here you can believe it's even, or here you can believe it's odd. However, you might be astute enough to have picked this up already. There's also the position where you believe neither. Right? So given the conditions here, we make a little axioms here. So we have not even equals odd, right? We'll call that an axiom. Not odd equals even. We would call that axiom. We had EO. This is how you kind of note an event space, right? An event space is the possibilities you can have, right? So the possibilities here is even and odd. There are no other possibilities. So in the event space, you only have even or odd. And then you can express that as E, V, not E, and I left it in the event space because I just thought it was easier because I think it kind of shows that it's in the event space. It's either even or it's not the case. It's even, right? There are no other options. So if it's not even and that equals odd, right? Because odd is not even. Then you have the dichotomy, and that V means or. Okay, so the little caret means and, the V means or here, even or odd, right? So ontologically, it's even or odd. But that's not our beliefs. Our beliefs could be they believe even, believe odd, believe neither, or irrationally believe both. Right? So the fence sitter is saying, I don't have a position either way on these gumballs. I'm agnostic on the position of the gumballs. I do not hold the belief that they're even. I do not hold the belief that they're odd. And again, this is where a lot of, I think, atheists will throw in a straw man and saying, well, you either believe or you don't believe. Well, yes, you either believe even or you don't believe they're even. You either believe odd or you don't believe they're odd. Those are strict dichotomies. Nobody's arguing that, right? And another thing that they love to straw man is, well, if you don't believe they're even, you're not asserting that they're odd. That is correct. Yes, that's the whole point of the gumballs, right? If you do not believe they're even, you're not asserting that they're odd. You can have either you're asserting that they're odd or have no position either way. Remember, if you eliminated the top position, the other two positions are the only ones left, right? So you have the middle position, agnostic, or the bottom position, right? And on the fence analogy. So here, by saying, look, somebody says, hey, Steve, the number of gumballs here are even. I say, well, I don't believe that. I'm not asserting that they're odd. right? I could have no position either way. And of course, I probably wouldn't, because you have no reasons to believe either or, right? I don't see any way to epistemically justify how you would believe the number of gumballs is even or odd, because there's no reasons to. There's nothing to suggest either or, right? I mean, it's just no way of knowing. It's a straight guess. And I don't mean knowing as in the way of epistemology, but knowing as in finding out information about it, right? Same thing when it comes to the number of stars. The number of stars in the universe are even or odd. What is it? I have no idea. It's one or the other. I don't have a belief they're even. I don't have the belief they're odd. I'm agnostic on that, right? Same thing. And I think that atheists get confused when they start confusing the difference between the dichotomous belief of being one and not that, right? So believing even or not even, as opposed to believing even or believing odd. There is a dichotomy to be had there, but it's not really a strict dichotomy. The reason it is because they're mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive, right? And that's what I consider to be a strict dichotomy, or at least dichotomous, is that when you have something that is mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive, you cannot be in both sets at the same time. So the number of gumballs can only be in the set of that's even, or it can only be in the set of odd. It can't be in both of them, and it has to be in one of them, right? So they are mutually exclusive, and they are jointly exhaustive. Theism and atheism are not mutually exclusive, or excuse me, they're mutually exclusive, and they're jointly exhaustive, right? So you can be a theist, but you can't be an atheist, and vice versa. However, the agnostic position is a third position, right? So it's neither theist or atheist. So just because you do not have to be a theist doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an atheist. For the same reason, just because you don't believe they're even doesn't mean you have to be odd. It's the same analogy. And this is why I'm fluxumed by the fact that so many atheists don't understand that. If you can understand that if somebody says, Steve, they're even, and I say, I don't believe they're even, but I'm not saying they're odd, then how can they not get that when a theist says God exists and you say, I don't believe that, all they're saying is I'm either agnostic, I have no position either way, or I believe that there are no gods, or God doesn't exist. They're just saying one of those two other positions, just like I am when I'm saying, well, I don't believe they're even. I'm either saying that I'm agnostic and I have no position either way, or I'm saying that they're odd. One or the other. That's the only possibilities, right? All right. Okay, let me move it on here. Give you guys time to catch up here. One second. Okay, clear all that out. All right, so what we got so far. If you do not believe they're even, then there's only two other possibilities, right? And the same thing with the analogy of the fence. If you don't believe God exists, there's only two other possibilities. And again, I want this to be analogous. I want this to be where atheists can say, oh, I see the analogy now. This is what Steve's been talking about for 6 years. So if you don't believe even, then one, you believe not even. That's one option you have available to you. Because if you believe not even, then you don't believe they're even, right? Remember the logic. BP implies not B, not P, right? So if you believe that they're even, or if you don't believe they're even, you believe not even, which means believe odd. This would be exactly the same as saying, I don't believe God exists because I believe there are no gods, right? Or two, you believe even nor odd. You believe neither. Right? And by the way, if you look at the logic when it comes to the and, like not BP and not B, not P, you could work it out, but it is the same as neither believe nor, right? So you're gonna have to trust me on that one. If you want to go check it out as a lookup, an exercise to the student, be my guest, but it does it's exactly the same as saying neither believe even nor odd, which is the agnostic. I have a question. Wolfgang asked me, explain how Dillahunty uses it wrong. I don't think he uses it wrong. I just don't think he goes far enough. Right? The way Dillahunty uses the gumball analogy is merely to show, just to say or show, if you don't believe even, you're not asserting odd. Yeah, he's right on that, sure. But the problem is he doesn't go far enough. This is why I wrote Gumballs and God, to explain why he doesn't go far enough. Because if you don't believe they're even, sure, you're not asserting they're odd, but you're only one of the two other positions. You're asserting that they're odd, or you have no position either way. The lack of belief atheist, which the atheist community of Austin and American Atheists promote, right? If you just don't believe you're an atheist, you're a lack of belief atheist. A lack of belief atheist is basically, in this particular case, the way I use the terminology of lack of belief atheist, it is an atheist who actually says, I don't have a positive belief. Now, logically, all lack of belief atheist has to be either under a strong atheist, right, or agnostic. There's no other options. So we don't go around usually saying, look, I'm a lack of belief atheist, but I actually have a strong epistemic status. I believe there are no gods. It just doesn't, it doesn't how we use the terms, right? So a lack of belief atheist is somebody who says, look, I just lack a belief. That's how I'm using it, right? So that's how we use the term. Although strong atheist would be a subset of lack of belief atheist, logically speaking. I do recognize that. So all strong atheists are logically lack of belief atheists, but the term lack of belief atheist is just strictly somebody who says, I do not have a position either way. I lack a belief, right? So I don't think at all Dylan Hunter uses it wrong, right? I just think he doesn't go far enough because he's basically promoting agnosticism. He's promoting, hey, if you lack a belief, you don't have a position either way. Now he's calling that atheism, which assumes agnosticism, but he's taking two positions. It's strictly something that atheists do for political reasons for the most part. I've been told this by actual people that work for American Atheists, like their editor, Pam Whistle. She's fully admitted to this, that she doesn't care about philosophy. It is strictly for political reasons. But it is intellectually dishonest because they're trying to take two pieces of the pie, right? There's three quarters of the pie. There's the top, the middle, and the bottom, right? The theist, agnostic, and atheist. And they're trying to assume both the bottoms. And it's very dishonest. But, all right, so let's move it on here. I hope that answers your question, Wolfgang. So if the proposition is the number of gumballs is even, the negation of that is the number of gumballs is odd, which is the same as saying not even, right? So it is the case it's even or not even. One of those has to be true, just like either God exists or God does not exist. The proposition that a theist offers is God exists. The proposition that the atheist offers is God doesn't exist. So when someone says there's no proposition of atheism, they have no idea what they're talking about. Of course there is, because for every P, there's a not P. For every positive proposition, there's a negation of that proposition, which is still, by the way, positive because you're making the claim there's no God. That is a positive claim. Wolfgang says, but his conclusion is a bit incomplete for the reasons you mentioned. Yeah, that's why I said he doesn't go far enough, right? I think my Gumballs and God definitely goes far enough, and if you guys have not read it yet, go read it and share it everywhere. Matter of fact, like I said, I originally was going to put this as a short presentation for atheists, but I changed my mind on that because, again, I want theists to know these things too. I want theists to be able to call atheists out on this, and I want atheists to have something to come back to and say, hey, look, I've checked the logic on this. Steve's right. Theists love that kind of stuff. Theists love philosophy. I mean, you guys listened to my review of Aaron's video with those three Muslim guys from the Thought, was it the Thought Project? Yeah, they know this stuff, right? They're learning these types of topics. And if atheists don't keep up, I'm sorry, but this whole I don't believe you or I lack a belief, it's going to fall behind. It's not going to keep up with the type of quality conversations that's being had in a more academic type of discussion. Matter of fact, if you guys go over and watch Answers and Reason, they had a very good interview with I just know him by Justin. I'm sorry, I don't know his Muslim name now. I'm not trying to dead name. I just don't remember what it was. Khalil, is it Khalil something or other? I'm so sorry. But anyways, they had a really good discussion with him because they were talking on a very intellectual level. They were talking on a very philosophical level. Did they agree with him? No. Did Justin agree with them? No. Who cares? They had a great discussion. Right, Thought Adventure Podcast. That's what it was. Yes, thank you, Dave. So if you guys haven't checked it out, go check out Trolley Dave and Joe on Answers and Reason. I love those two guys. I really do. They have been basically promoting exactly what I've been saying for frickin' I don't know. Well, not as long as I have, but they've definitely caught on and said, yeah, Steve's right on this. Although I think they kind of did independently, but I'm sure that they've read my stuff and they've kind of agreed. Allah, yes, Khalil Allah. Appreciate that. How can I forget Allah? Make a bad theist, right? Or I'd make a bad Muslim if I forgot the name Allah, right? All right. Moving on here. Got a question. Is there a difference between lack of belief and agnosticism? 3 rusty nails ask. Well, every belief has a lack of belief component. And you think about this. Every belief has a lack of belief component. And that goes back to the logic, right? If you believe God exists, you don't believe God doesn't exist. You lack a belief God doesn't exist. If you believe God doesn't exist, you lack the belief God does exist. So every belief has a lack of belief component. So agnosticism is basically the lack of belief, the proposition Gumballs is even, and lack of belief the Gumballs is odd. It lacks a belief of both those propositions, right? So the theist lacks a belief of the atheist proposition, the atheist lacks a belief in the theist proposition, and the agnostic lacks a belief in both. How simple is that? It doesn't get any simpler than that. It's not rocket science. This is what I'm saying. If atheists just took this basic schema and ran with it, it would be so simplistic, and it was. It was for hundreds of years until 1972 when Anthony Flew decided to write The Presumption of Atheism and just butchered this stuff. And the atheist community of Austin and American Atheists just took that and kind of ran with it. Even David Silverman took it and ran with it when he wrote Fighting God, which I've read, and one of these I'll do more of a review on it. George Smith in 1974 wrote Atheism, A Case Against God, which was even worse, I thought. And, they've been trying to promote this ever since in New Atheism. But in the academic realm, right, atheism is normatively held as the belief that God does not exist. And there's many reasons for this. It just makes so much more sense and eliminates so many problems. But a lot of atheists don't like that for some reason. And again, I haven't heard anybody tell me why, except for maybe a handful say, well, we do it for political reasons and for voting power. Okay, I get that. It's a utility argument. Okay, but philosophically speaking, I've never had an atheist explain to me the philosophical reasoning for wanting to make something defined in the negative. Because as you guys have read from my work, the WASP argument and the semantic collapse argument, it just has so many logical and epistemological issues. Hopefully, I haven't heard back from Dr. Malik yet, but he was telling, what was the show he was on? It was on the Empathetic Atheist channel, which is Khalil's Allah's. He still calls himself the Empathetic Atheist, I guess, or the show is. But Dr. Malik was on there telling them that he's going to do a collab with me on one of his channels to talk about his paper called Defining Atheism and the Burden of Proof, which I did a little review on that he really, really liked, and that atheist semantic collapse argument that he wants to talk about as well. So that's going to be kind of fun. But let's see let's kind of move on here. I don't know even where I'm at, so. I think I'm going back to the fence here. Hang on. All right, so going back to the fence here, again, believes the proposition top, not believes the proposition false, and then the agnostic believes even, right? This is how it would relate. The bottom believes odd, and then the middle would be neither believes even nor odd. And there you go. That's it in a nutshell. This relates the Gumballs to the fence, and this is what fence sitting is. So the lack of belief atheist who does not have a positive belief, they are fence sitting. Logically demonstrated. Because they hold to not PP, right? And the only positions you can have for not PP are the middle or the bottom. And if you hold to the bottom, you have a positive epistemic position, which is you believes that God doesn't exist, or if the Gumballs believes odd, or you neither believe either or nor odd. So, all right, guys, that's my entire presentation. I'm keeping this as short as possible, but I don't mind answering questions. This took about a half hour, which I kind of thought it was going to be. So if you'd like to ask some questions, do it now. I will include the answers in Reason's video in my video description, and I'll probably include the one with Dr. Malik too, but I'll add them in after this renders, or at least when I get done. So what kind of questions? Intrigue Feline says, and the most stupid thing there is, Steve, Flew acknowledged that it wasn't the normative usage. That belief not, and suspend judgment was the most common understanding. Yes, in his paper, he expressly states this. That's the funniest part, because I have asked, atheists, have you read Flew's paper? Or even better, have you read Burgess Jackson's refutation of Flew's paper? None of them have. It boggles my mind that an atheist has not read a paper on atheism. It's like a biologist not reading a paper on biology. I mean, sure, you could call yourself an atheist, and you probably don't need to know much about it. But why wouldn't you want to learn about something? If you're an atheist activist, you probably want to read about it. If you're not interested in that, that's fine. But if you're out there having these conversations and you're talking to educated theists and you're even talking to educated atheists that know these types of topics, why would you not want to read these papers? But Flew says, quote, whereas nowadays The usual meaning of atheist in English is, quote, someone who asserts that there is no such being as God. I want the word to be understood not positively, but negatively. That was his entire argument, and there's a huge flaws in his argument. I won't get into this now, but there's huge flaws in his argument. But the new atheist, TM, which is a very specific type of new atheist, they've taken that and ran with it. They're like, oh, atheist has always been, lack of belief. No, it hasn't. Matter of fact, the original usages of atheists were without favor of the gods, because there was Christians that had denied the Roman state-sanctioned gods. The A in atheist had actually represented not as a negation, as in the disbelief or denial of the gods, which is a positive position. It wasn't just merely without gods. And so a lot of them don't even know the history of the term. And so, yeah, he was very clear on that. William says, thanks for the presentation. I'll take a full look at your blog entry later. Thank you, sir. If you guys haven't read my blog, Dr. Pai has nicely and kindly written as a guest spot a blog entry, which is on the hierarchy of sets. Really good reading. If you guys want to learn about a little, just the intro level of the difference between fields and groups and rings and monads and all that kind of stuff, he broke it down as about as simplistically as I think humanly possible could do without losing precision. So go check that out. Let's see here. Can agnostics justify their positions? Well, I'd hope so, right? I mean, an agnostic says, look, I cannot reach a conclusion to believe God exists or God does not exist. And yes, there are reasons for this, right? And I've gone over them many times, right? So yes, even agnosticism must be justified. And and by the way, that is lack of belief atheism, right? Lack of belief atheism is synonymous with agnosticism for all practical purposes. So is lack of belief theism. Lack of belief theism, lack of belief atheism, and agnosticism all represent the same position of fence sitting. There's no difference as far as that goes. They're all saying, hey, we all lack a belief. We don't have a position either way. Why don't you have a position either way? Well, here's my reasons for that. Right? But if you cannot give reasons for why you have a particular position, it's not rational. You can have that. You can say, look, I don't believe. Why don't you believe? Oh, I don't know. Leprechauns told me it wasn't true. That's not a rational position. So you can still have made some kind of statement and say, look, I don't believe there's a God. Okay, great. Why don't you believe there's a God? Well, I don't have to tell you. I don't have to have a burden of proof for that. Yeah, you do. If you want to make it rational. If not, you don't have a rational reason to deny, or not deny, to say that you don't believe. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have that position. It's just unjustified, right? There might be a lot of people out there that have unjustified positions. Whatever. But if you want to make it into a rational position and be justified for having it, then you would say, look, I don't believe, and here's my reasons. Now, the person who believes that there are no gods, they do it, I think, more effectively, right? They don't just say, look, I don't believe, and here's the reasons. They say, look, there are no gods. Let me tell you why. And tomorrow when we do a judgment call at 11 a.m. tomorrow, I hope people call in and talk about this a little bit, because I had told one person, Bill, that if he wants to call in, I'll give him reasons why an atheist would say there's no gods. I'll put on my atheist hat and say, look, there are no gods. Here's why. It's completely justifiable. Matter of fact, it's odd. When I actually had an atheist once, a couple weeks ago, actually more than once, but it happened again a couple weeks ago, they said, an atheist shouldn't claim there are no gods. And I'm like, what the hell? Why? Why would you not claim there's any gods if you're an atheist? That's when actually atheism is understood as. But as long as you can justify it, let me make this very clear for the people that are new to the channel. Claiming that there are no gods or claiming that there is a God doesn't require you to prove anything, doesn't require you to demonstrate anything. What it requires is sufficient reason to justify why you hold that particular position. Be it you believe, be it you don't believe it you believe the negation, whatever your position lies, whether you're fence sitting or not. Why are you fence sitting? What's the reasons why you lack a belief? Are the theist arguments not convincing you? Are the atheist arguments not convincing you? What are the arguments that you think are more convincing? Which ones you don't? Do you think it's equal? Now, let me make it very clear that fence position there is very wide. It's not like a sharp line of demarcation between one side and the other. It's quite wide. You can sit very comfortably on that fence. You can lean a little bit to the right. You can lean a little bit to the left, right? But the lack of belief atheist might lean a little bit to the atheist side, might be 50-50. They might say, hey, look, there's no evidence either way. But the point is that lack of belief atheist is sitting on that fence. Unless you hold a positive epistemic status, let me make this very clear. Unless you hold a positive epistemic status, meaning that you believe it's even, or you believe it's odd, or you believe God exists, or you believe God does not exist, you are fence sitting. Period. The logic shows it. The reasoning shows it. The literature shows it. At this point, I think that any atheist who denies it just is doing so out of sheer cognitive dissonance or just argument from incredulity. They have never presented a logical reason for it, ever, nor do I expect them to do so. However, if they do, then I'll take a look at it then. But I'm not going to be... I don't really entertain people that are, for some reason, have these new accounts. Like on Twitter, you'll notice that they're, but hey, made an account today, has all these people that they follow that I have blocked, and I'm going to, give some reasons why Steve's wrong. I'm not going to bother with them. I'm only going to be holding how should I say this? I'm only going to give my time to people that have been around a while, that have an actual account, and have actually things to say about why they disagree. That's what I want. I want people that disagree because they actually believe it and are willing to discuss it, not just people that make a fake account and then throw some nonsense out there, because Tree Feline and I have already dealt with that, and it's not going to happen again. So I want actual people out there to say, look, here's the reasons why I think this is wrong. So let me ask you guys in the live chat, what do you guys think so far? Would you say that lack of belief atheists are fence sitters? 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for agnostic on it. How do you like that? See? By the way, 3 kind of demonstrates my point, if you think about it. So, 1, I'll type it out so if you guys get confused. 1, yes, 2, no, 3, agnostic. So there you go. Let's see here. By the way, hi, Shane of Living Waters. It's been a while. What about what is God? I believe the first cause of the universe is God, but it is distinct from the world and separate from it and its concerns. God moved on. That would be discussion. Well, that would be kind of deism. And that's what the dialogue kind of dives into when it comes to the metaphysical questions about why there's something from nothing, right? Well, that goes to the whole argument from contingency. Why they think that a necessary being would be God. And so there's a lot to be had in that discussion. Don't get me wrong. All right, so there's 2 people that say no, and I'm just kind of curious, what is it that they disagree with? So outside the cube, you said no. Archimedes, 2, you said no. What is it that you seem to disagree with? And let me see if I can absolve you of those reservations. And also, when this video gets done, please feel free to leave a comment and ask me the questions there, too. However, like I said, if they're newer accounts and just trollish accounts, they're not going to get very far. I'm not even going to respond to some of them. I just block right away because I don't want to waste my time with those people. I really like the higher level discussions, but I want the people to be legit in what they believe. And then as soon as I get done with this, I'll be setting up tomorrow's show, 11 o'clock tomorrow for Judgment Call. Feel free to share that link. It is going to be on mental well-being. And we want people to call in tomorrow and talk about their mental well-being, whether it just has to do with, things that are going on with their lives, with the conditions of the world. Just a place to vent and let us know how you're doing well with your mental well-being. Because a lot of people aren't doing well, and a lot of people are doing well, and maybe the people that are doing well can give advice to the people that aren't. H2 Production says, it can be said there are fence sitters, but I'd say they're ignorant assholes. They make a positive claim and then revert to I don't know upon further discussion. That happens as well too, right? I mean, I have had enough discussions with atheists. They'll say, oh, well, all gods are bullshit, but I'm not making a positive claim. Well, the hell you're not. Of course you are. You're making a positive claim. You can't say you merely lack a belief and then say, well, I'm not making a claim when you say there are no gods, right? So that's just silly. And I think most atheists that are lack of belief atheists, I'm guessing here, but I'd say the vast majority of them actually actually believe there are no gods. I believe most of them probably have a positive epistemic status if they just answer questions directly, but most of them don't. Unfortunately, matter of fact, I'm sure John Richards is going to listen to this video after the fact, but I had to mute him for 24 hours in the Great Debate community today because he wouldn't answer a direct question. He says, well, if something's the case and you don't need belief, right? He says, belief is something has something that has been unproven or untested or unknowable. I'm like, no, belief is something where if you hold a position to be true, or a proposition to be true, you believe it. And I says, he's like, well, no, that's just, redundant or something. And I said, so what, you don't believe there's gravity? And he wouldn't answer the question. It's like, look, either you believe there's gravity or don't believe there's gravity. There's no other options. There's no fence to be had, right? There's no fence in that particular position, because it's either the case that you believe or you don't believe. Serious. That's it, right? Just like you believe there's God or you don't believe there's God, or you believe there's no God or you don't believe there's no God. And I want to know his position, but he couldn't answer a very simple question, yes or no. And I get very tired of that. If you're going to have a dialogue with me and you can't answer direct questions, and I don't want to hear this, complex question fallacy. None of these are complex question fallacies, right? They're simple questions. And if you want to caveat them, that's absolutely fine. Say, yes, I believe there's gravity, but here's the caveat. But when you're telling me in some kind of implications that you don't believe there's gravity because you don't have beliefs, so you think that beliefs only have to do with things that are unknown or undetermined, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Because if you say that you don't believe there's gravity, I cannot hold you to be a rational person. I just can't. Outside the Cubit says, I literally just came in after rewatch the replay. I'll leave a comment there. I appreciate that. No, that's fine. Absolutely. Intrigue Feline, is there any word on a possible stream Tuesday, 10 a.m.? We have asked for special permission for certain things. We will probably get that by tomorrow, if we do get it. But we've gone directly to the court. We've gone directly to the judge. So possible. I don't know. I can't give an answer yet. So. Why believe in gravity when you know gravity exists? Well, and knowledge is a subset of gravity. Knowledge is a subset of gravity. Sorry, knowledge, that's going to be a quote taken out of context. Knowledge is a subset of belief, right? So if you know gravity exists, you have to believe gravity exists, right? So, yeah, you can say, look, I believe gravity exists because I know gravity exists, right? And it's fine to say either. If it is the case that you can say you know or you believe, right? You can lessen it and say, look, I believe 1 + 1 = 2, but that's because I know 1 + 1 = 2, right? So it doesn't matter what you say in that case. I can believe 1 + 1 = 2, or I can know 1 + 1 = 2, and it doesn't matter. And by the way, fun fact, if you know something, you cannot be wrong on that. I want to sink in that with some atheists out there that don't seem to understand that. If you know something, you cannot be wrong on it. And I know it's going to blow a lot of people's minds, but it really shouldn't. It actually, if you think about it, that has to be the case, right? It has to be the case, because if you know something, that means it is true. You believe it to be true, and you're justified to believe it's true. And if you have all those three conditions, right, you cannot be wrong. Because if it's true, you can't be wrong. In order to have that knowledge, you can't be wrong. So if it is the case, you actually truly do know something, you cannot be wrong on it. Now the question comes in: does that person actually know that, right? And when a theist says, "Well, I know God exists," well, that's where the problems come in. People say, "Well, we haven't established that it's true, right? We haven't established the case that it's true." But if I say I know 0.99 repeating equals 1, I can prove that with mathematics. P equals true. I believe it's true. I'm justified to believe it's true. Why? Because it's mathematical proof. So when I say I know 0.99 repeating equals 1, I can't be wrong on that. Right? So, just a little fun facts of epistemology there. And by Street Feeling says, and by extension, if you state a belief something, you do not automatically also know it. That is true too. I could say I believe A equals A. I'm not claiming that I know it. Now, I will claim that because I believe in a priori knowledge, but a skeptic won't, right? A skeptic, hardcore skeptic, a Pyrrhonian skeptic would probably, just say, look, we don't even know what we can know. And an academic skeptic would say, look, we can't know anything. So all knowledge claims are false. There's no such thing as knowledge to an academic skeptic. Kimawaki says, give me some Getty Air, Steve. One of these days I don't think we really have gone over the Getty Air problems in great detail on this channel, have we? I mean, we've talked about them. But maybe we should. If you want me to do a thing on the Getty Air problems, and especially with I love Dr. Linda Zaleski. She writes a lot on against reliabilism. I'm not a fan of reliabilism. I do think Getty Air problems can have some workarounds called what's called JTP plus, or Justified True Belief plus, which has what's called a truth tracking condition, using possible word semantics. But she makes a very good argument that all belief first. Theories of law, all belief first theories of knowledge have Getty Air type problems. They're all suffering from epistemic luck, and I think she's right on that. But what are you going to do, right? No theory is perfect, right? So it doesn't really like destroy anything. I still use JTP or JTP plus because no philosophical position is perfect. 82 says, I think it boils down to arrogant ignorance. The quote, new atheist talking heads are willfully philosophically ignorant, belligerently so. Steve, do you agree? Yes. I think that's the problem with the atheist talking heads, is because they have never found a way to refute any of the stuff that I go over on my channel and anything that I do on my blog. That's not claiming that my blog is perfect. That's not claiming that I don't have any errors. That's not claiming that I cannot be incorrect on those things. What I am claiming that I've never seen any of them give any kind of solid refutation for any of it. They just go tell people Steve's wrong. Steve's wrong by fiat. Words are, Steve's words, what is it? Steve's a bitch of language or something like that. Whatever. But when it comes down to it, none of them have actually shown that what I like this presentation. Nobody has ever shown that's not right. And who knows? Maybe I might have completely conceptual errors. Maybe that's completely wrong. I don't think so, because there's consilience with everything I've read on it, right? Dr. Oppie's stuff has a consilience here. Dr. Demi's stuff has a consilience. Dr. Burgess Jackson has a consilience. So I don't think I'm messed up on it. But if you think so, all I ask is that you give me a good argument, right? And so the arguments out there are not that good. Yeah. Sarim Akbar says, "What would you say? Or would you say most atheists have some epistemic foundations?" I don't know, man. I have a hard time with atheists to have no education or reading in epistemology whatsoever, or philosophy. Because you ask them, like, well, how do you know this? And I don't mean to sound like a Seitan Brunicate, right? I'm asking them seriously, what theories of knowledge do you use for this? And none of them have an idea what a theory of knowledge even is, right? They don't know what JTP is, or reliabilism, or Tarski semantic theories, or pragmatic theories. They don't know any of these things. So I don't know what they're gauging their knowledge on, right? What is it that you say you know this? Well, based upon what? And worse is when they say, well, I know this, therefore I don't believe it. That's just ridiculous. I mean, unless they have some theory of knowledge that doesn't have belief first, which they do exist, but they're very, very, scant, I guess. I mean, there's some semantic theories that might be like that, but the most common understanding of knowledge is a tripartite theory of knowledge where you have three conditions for it. You meet those three conditions, you can say you have knowledge, and one of them is belief. And so when atheists start avoiding that word belief, it makes them look very silly. When atheists won't admit that they believe gravity exists, they look very silly. When they won't admit they believe Santa Claus doesn't exist, they look very silly. But this video at least can help you guys show people logically that a lack of belief atheist is in fact a fence sitter, right? And it looks like when I looked back, everybody is saying 1 for the most part. There's a couple 3s, but that's fine. A couple 2s. Aneurysm incoming. You put a 2? You don't believe this? Yes, you do, man. No. I don't know why aneurysm incoming put 2. I have to have him call tomorrow and ask me. All right. Yeah, Kimomaki said Linda Zaleski is very convincing in her arguments. Yeah, she's really, really good. I really like that paper she had on the Getty Air problems and showing that they all suffer from some kind of epistemic luck. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. I'm going to keep this under an hour because, again, it's going to be a short presentation. I think an hour is just fine. If you guys like this and, think you got some benefit out of it, please like the video, subscribe, share it on social media, let theists know, let atheists know. Become a member of the channel, be great. If you want to become a patron of the channel, that's even better. Well, actually, both are good. I don't really care. But if anything that you do that show support to this channel, I really appreciate it. Patrons, you have instant access to me, and I love you guys. I mean, it's what I survive on. So my Patreon is my lifeblood, and then the members channels and super chats are my other lifeblood. So I appreciate it. Tomorrow, again, we're going to be having judgment call, and then on Tuesday I'll probably stream during the hearing at 10 a.m. For guys who don't know, Kyle Curtis has been called in front of the judge to explain why he has not complied with the court orders. Here's a perfect example, by the way, of this put into practice. It is either the case that Kyle shows, or it is not the case that Kyle shows. There are no other logical options. Good night.